Hey everybody, another Indie Hour. We are back. It is episode, I think this is 38, and we are deep into it. We are today reviewing, as the patrons have foretold and decided, a game all about dwarves. In the age-old argument of what's cooler, orcs or dwarves, this was clearly written by dwarves. It's Torch and Shield by GRIMSKALD Games. Now, if you haven't watched one of these before, this is going to be probably your first outing into the world of indie games. Here on GMG, the patrons pick a game every single week, and we take a look at it, try and throw a spotlight on it, and give it some more attention. Just get more attention out there in the world of mainstream gaming to the fact that you can use your models for all kinds of stuff. So today's Torch and Shield is a dungeon-delving indie warband skirmish game. If Warhammer Quest and Mordheim had a kid, it would probably look a little bit like GRIMSKALD's. It'd be born with a beard, obviously. GRIMSKALD's Torch and Shield. It'd be born with a beard and come out kicking, screaming, and demanding beer. And they ran a crowdfund, I believe, 2 years ago, as I looked through their Kickstarter, to basically get this thing off the ground, printed in hardback, and this Aussie-based project has a bunch of STLs on my mini factory for a variety of things, and fully delivered, I believe, last October, according to their update on the website here. If you did not back it, there was a ton of stuff available. They did like a full dungeon set of like printable STLs, miniatures for the bad guys, miniatures for the good guys. You had digital like assets as well for the miniatures to play the game, for the dungeon itself, for all the little critters that can inhabit the dungeon. And then you also had like printable, like full color PDF, like dungeon tiles that weren't like 3D printer tiles. They were like you print them on printer paper and then mount them if you want to do like a classic kind of cardstock thing. Now, since its release, you've got a full website devoted to it here. There are print partners available for printing the miniatures. So if you did want to use some of these multi-part resin prints, you can grab them through third parties. There's lots of video content and even free tiles. So like you can get all of the stuff from the crowdfund, it looks like, printably on their website just to print out and use. So if you want to print yourself a dungeon, even if you're not planning to use it for this game, you can go grab that, print it off, and it's all in 1-inch squares. The game is a square-based tile game for you to play through. And let's have a look at the super sweet rulebook in full color for this game. So, Torch and Shield. Now, I grabbed this off Wargames Vault. It was 26 bucks Canadian and is in full color. Now, I believe the shop on the GRIMSKALD, actually, we'll just go back and look. Why don't we just go back and look, Ash? You can do that right now. The shop on the GRIMSKALD website, I believe, has the book available. So if you go to Torch and Shield, you can grab it digitally here. Yep, I think that just links to Wargames Vault, though. Oh, no, maybe it just goes right to their website. But you can grab the models, you can grab the core rulebook, the card deck, all the stuff that looks like it was available during the crowdfund is available to buy there. And then there's some expansions like Darker Halls, and then like little gubbins, like you can grab Torch and Shield dice, extra tokens for putting on the game board, and then dungeon tiles set and plastic doors. This is extremely cool. If you wanted like a Warhammer Quest style set of terrain, it's fully available. So you can paint the doors and have the tiles all in heavy cardstock, which is really neat. So again, I grabbed it digitally off Wargames Vault. That's what we're looking at today, and I assume that means that this is the most up-to-date rulebook. So let's dive in. What do we got here? Well, we've got a full color, printed in and dedicated to Philip Andrew Adley, and produced by GRIMSKALD in Australia. And it's published in 2023. Full credits, as is only right and proper, to all the playtesters, all the artists, and all the designers and layout people. 124 pages. And it is all hyperlinked. So if you want to go through here, you can grab a link and just pile through. I love when big rule books like this are hyperlinked so I can just jump around. And gives a lot of time to world building. So if you want to understand the Dwargas and the world of Torch and Shield, basically we live in a fantasy world where there have been like a series of fallen holds. The Dwarf Kingdom used to be much more powerful and huge. The folds have fallen, and dwarves now are constantly adventuring into the darkness to try and reclaim glory and relics and things that are down there. And they go and they delve the ruins. So despite the decay of years, the holds are mostly structurally sound. Dwarves carved their homes out of the very mountains, and as a result, they're designed for longevity. Even so, risks are present, and many years with no upkeep have left areas weakened to the ravages of time and monsters. The idea here is that your adventuring party is going to be digging through this and trying to find things left behind by their ancestors, be it gold, relics, and all kinds of other stuff. Now, we've also have some cataclysmic sort of stuff happening above ground. The dwarves and elves are clearly different, but it goes deeper than appearances. Where dwarves are reliable, elves are ephemeral. A dwarf will speak plainly, but an elf will often speak in riddles or verse. When a dwarf swears an oath, everyone knows they'll keep it. Elves, on the other hand, however, can be fickle and change their minds with the wind. So I love that everything in here is written basically from the dwarf's point of view. The rift of the two races was born from a terrible period known as the Cataclysm, and it was a time when the world was still young and the gods fought each other. The dwarf history said the elves made a bargain with Yagul, the demon god, an ancient terror confined to the bowels of the underworld. In exchange for dark power, the demon god asked the elves and dwarves to destroy the human race. The elves took this off from the dwarf clans, and beguiled many into accepting the wicked terms, but most of the dwarves saw the truth and sent them away under threat of violence. So basically, at the climax of these long struggles, Lorgrim and his army marched alongside the humans, and together they finally defeated the elven host. Despite the elven trickery, no mercy was granted the misguided dwarf allies, who were all but butchered. Still, the pain of this war would linger long into the memories of victors, and for the dwarven people, it would be a wound that would not heal. The elves were to be blamed, and ever since, the dwarves have held a grudge against the elven race. They rarely discuss it in detail, except to express their hatred of the elven treachery and to denounce the Yagul servants. So, yeah, there's a whole once powerful race basically brought low. The dwarves are kind of living amongst human society now. Dwarves pity humans because of their short lives and memories. Because of this, they had in their shared history, dwarves have developed a paternal attitude towards humans. But the humans aren't feeling so good about the dwarves now, and the dwarves are trying to go home into their holds. So this is the idea, basically. It's it's very much The Hobbit. With the dwarves as like a somewhat displaced people, and you have Thorin's company trying to go back into the hold. So again, you could reenact The Hobbit with this if you want to. Basic principles, profile cards and models. Profile cards looks a lot like an old Hero Quest card. Love this. And we got our basic stat line here. Our movement, our martial skill, our strength, our resilience, our agility, our nerve, our delve. And then I think the last one is our craft. We're trying to like fix things. You're going to also need a deck of cards. So along with each of your player cards, you're going to need a deck of cards, and that's for your initiative and special events. That's going to be used to basically like determine what order everything happens in, and you get access to special actions based upon whatever suit you pull. So the core mechanic for all those stats is going to be dice pools, and you're going to roll dice to make tests. All the 5s and 6s are considered a success. You need at least one success to succeed a test. Everything that's a 1 to 4 is a failure, and then if you roll nothing but 1s, you've blundered, and bad things can happen. There's additional things you need for the course of the game. You need the Coin of Fate. If you're playing solo, you only need 1 because you're always the Fate holder. But if you are not playing solo, then opposing teams where the monsters are interfering in between you, you'll pass the Coin of Fate and you'll be the fated one going back and forth. And the fated one will like determine the causes and like the breaks and things. And then we also have like effects where the Coin of Fate must be handed. Like it's also like bad things can happen at the end when you draw events. So the fated one can have effects from the event table basically happen to them more often because they're the fated person for the turn. Light sources. These tokens represent the places where active light sources are in the area of play. Light sources will be explained later. But are integral. You can use anything. Tiny light LEDs are great, add atmosphere to your game. You also have a fuel die that's counting down every turn, a fuel counter. And when you're out of fuel, all your lights start to go out, and the monsters can get advantages when it gets dark. So it's kind of a push your luck mechanic, which is cool, where the fuel amount that's remaining is sort of your turn limit to get in and get out and try and complete your objectives. And then damage tokens to track who's being hurt and who's still alive. You might have keywords like warrior or dwarf or orc or whatever. Certain things can affect them more. And then your playing pieces. Models are your people. Crew is your group of people. Monster is a non-player controlled enemy. The playing area is referred to as the hold, and it's made up of structures, objects, and items. And then structures are things like doors, floors, and walls. Objects are things that occupy more than one tile. That's either a model or a structure like a chest or a table or something like that. And then you got adjacent squares and combat zones. The 8 squares around any model are considered its combat zone. So it's like a tackle zone in Blood Bowl. And an engaged model is someone who's inside that zone. If models engaged and knocked down, its combat zone becomes inactive and models can move through the adjacent squares freely. So as soon as you're fighting a goblin, people can move by that goblin because now he's occupied, right? So it's a little bit like tagging someone in the Middle-earth SPG. As soon as a model's charged in, you can go around that model to go fight somebody else. And if you're knocked down, then you're too busy to have an engagement. Again, very Blood Bowl-y. Dispersion, you basically flip a card, and you'll have suits and face cards. So you're going to just randomly flip a card to see what happens. So if it's a random suit, it's going to go into one of the 4 that are in like the cardinal positions, and then the northwest, northeast, southeast, southwest positions are all going to be the face cards. Characteristics, traits, and actions. You've got all your characteristics. Traits are things that might be different about you, like you might have night vision if you're a dwarf. You might be magic resistant. And then actions are things you can do. And there's universal actions, suit-based universal actions, and then like keyword-based universal actions that like only dwarves and stuff can do. Line of fire is what you can see. And you can't see through other models. So here's our model profile. Movement, it's how many squares you can move. Martial skill, the first one, it's weapon skill, blitz skill baked together. So martial skill is first for your melee and second for your shooting. Strength is how hard you hit. And then your resilience is how much damage you can take before you die. Your agility is actually, it does a bunch of things. It's a testing skill, but it's also the max amount of hits you can do when you're fighting in melee. Because you cap your damage by your agility. Your nerve is what you're going to test on to see if you run away or not. And then your delve is when you're trying to do things that have to do with like traversing the actual like hold itself. So like jumping over chasms and pitfalls and stuff. And then your craft is like disarming traps, picking door locks, anything that would be a skill-based action. So you can see here this gray shield, he costs you 14 gold to hire. He has the dwarf, warrior, and hero keywords, which might trigger certain effects or unlock certain actions, like warriors can do certain actions. And then hero allows him to be a leader and stuff. And we go into light and darkness. Okay, so where you can see and where you can't see. So things can either be shrouded or illuminated. By default, everything is shrouded. You're in the dark, right? You're in a dark dungeon. For a square to be illuminated, it must be in the area of a light source, so to have line of fire to it. You'll find there's references to light sources in the rules, but the most common are torches, lanterns, and things that are burning that you're carrying. An active light source is a maximum range of 8 squares and will illuminate every square that has line of sight to, basically. So if a square that you're in, so Bort, I love that this dwarf's name is Bort. My son's name is also Bort. Oh no, we're all out of Bort name tags. That's a Conan O'Brien or a Simpsons joke that most of you won't get. But Bort is one of my favorite things. You can see though that the light source on Bort basically isn't hitting Kazan because that corner's there because it doesn't have line of fire to it. But we'll hit Kurd because you can corner cut through squares. While in a Shroud Square, dwarves are -1 to tests using their craft and delve, right? Because you can't see. And you're also -1 to performing range attacks that target shrouded models under a penalty of -1 to the martial skill test. So you can be shrouded and shoot something you can see, but if the model you're shooting is shrouded, then you're going to lose a die from your test. A monster that's shrouded gains a +1 bonus to its martial skill. Now, this is always dice added to the pool. As well as its agility, nerve, and delve test, and it's considered to automatically win any drawn contests, getting a single hit. So the monsters can all see perfectly well in the dark, and that gives them a bonus. The dwarves cannot. They can see enough that they get around. Like they're not blind, but they can't see as well as they can see in the light. And then finally, your fuel counter. At the end of every turn, your fuel counter goes down by 1. The scenario will tell you what to set it to at the beginning of the game. And once you're done, you have to start making tests to see if things go out. So for instance, a lantern will go out on a 1 every turn at the end of that round. Once you're out of fuel, a torch will go out on a 1 or a 2. And then your light sources start to disappear. And then all of a sudden, the monsters are getting all their shrouded advantages. We get different kinds of monsters, swarm monsters, little guys, brood monsters. They're kind of the common ones. Brute monsters, the big guys. They can take up more than 1 square. And then beasts. And these are like the big giant things like a dragon or, like a larger than an ogre sort of thing. And then some descriptions of the hold itself, how you move around, elevation. So there's full rules for like doorways, doors, entrances. It would be a cool reason to buy that plastic door and tile set. Although you could also just easily make these, or repurpose them from another game like HeroQuest. more background, and then here we go to the actual structure of playing the game. So here's our key sort of like points here. So first you're going to choose a scenario and set up your area of play. So if you've got like a scenario, there's I think like some basic and advanced ones in this rule book. I think there's 6 advanced ones and maybe 6. I don't remember the actual head count on them. There's at least 10 scenarios in this book. And then they'll tell you basically how to set up all of your tiles. And then you have to agree on a scenario, or you can just randomly determine one to play. Determine the fated one. So you flip the coin of fate to see who's going to be the fated one to start off with. Deploy your crews, so put them wherever the scenario tells you to start off putting them, and then play the game. So first is the delving phase. So each player draws 1 action card for their warrior still in play, and the leader, if he's still alive in your warband, can sheath a card, which you can use as like a trump. You can use it to be like another option for your initiative order. And then in descending order, and you can choose to either use your aces high or low. It goes ace, king, queen, jack, 10 to 2, and then ace at the bottom as well. So if you're holding an ace, you can use it either to go first or go last, depending on if you want, but you have to choose one of those things. And then finally, you'll activate as your like initiative flip based on that order. And then suit order also takes precedence. So if you tie, basically, it goes hearts, trump diamonds, trump clubs, trump spades. And then players take turn activating their warriors, with the fated one taking priority in the event of any ties. Activation cards are placed on the relevant warrior profile as they activate, and then jokers may be used at any time to steal priority, unless both players play jokers of the same color, at which point the fated one again decides the priority. So the deck of cards comes into play a whole bunch here. It's basically integrated in the game turn. It's a really clever use of a deck of cards as an activation order, and that's why they publish or sell basically their own kind of like themed one, because you can use it a lot. I love when games use very common game assets. This doesn't use polyhedral dice, just D6s and a deck of cards as like all of the core mechanics, and the rest of it is just your miniature collection, your terrain. So not that many tokens on the table. There's some status effects and stuff. You'll just mark them on your character sheet. And this is again one of my kind of ideal like amount of shit on the table style games, because I don't like seeing too much stuff there. Just having a common deck of cards is more than enough. Once you've activated all your models, you have the monster phase. Any monster in play then activates and behaves in their description. So all the monsters have like a behavior chart for what they do. And then fight phase, you fight after you've basically done everything else. So everything moves. Again, kind of Lord of the Ringsy, kind of like Middle Earth strategy battle game. All the good guys move, all the bad guys move. If you're playing an opposed PvP game, then it's both you and your opponent moving. Then the monsters kind of activated that aren't engaged. And then finally, everybody fights. So it's a simultaneous kind of game turn. All engaged modules resolve contests in order decided by the fated one. So the fated one, again, that coin's super important. You're going to pick which fight happens first. And then finally, the event phase. All engaged warriors separate and are no longer engaged. So what you do is you pick one-on-ones and many-on-ones by having models like come to the edge of their square, basically, and touch each other. And then you push them all back into the middle of their square so they're not engaged anymore. And then crews that have lost more than half their number have to make a turn back test. That's basically a nerve check for your leader or your highest nerve. And if you don't succeed, the game's over. It's your route check for more time. You're like, nope, we're going back. We're going home, boys. See you later. Then you check for objectives. Check to see if any light sources go out. If the fuel counter's done, the fuel counter goes down by 1. And the fated one draws a card and resolves it on the event table. And you resolve any events that are carried out from previous turns that like are continuing to go. Then the fate coin goes to the other player, and the game will continue until it's over. You end the game if either you fail a turn back test, you voluntarily turn back because you lost too many guys, or any scenarios are completed. And then finally, the game will end when a set number of turns have been played for some objectives and stuff as well. In the event that a true turn back, the other player is considered to be the winner regardless of the objectives, because you just get all the time in the world to go and do whatever it is you want to do. So a nice, simple turn structure. It's pretty reminiscent of, like I said, a couple games came to mind here, right? Middle Earth strategy battle game with a combined game turn. And then the activation order, using a deck of cards. There's a lot of like Old West games that'll do that, right? Card cutting for priority and stuff. But then the event phase also has a little bit of the event deck from like Rangers of Shadow Deep. So tons of things like kind of pulled together in here to make a soup of good ideas. But are really easy to remember and replicate turn structure. All right, delving phase. Like I said, this is just the same thing that I just explained, sort of writ large. So how do you delve? You go in the activation order, and then activations. Now, activation blunders. Sometimes a player will overlook a card. So if you miss a card order that you need to go in, like let's say you had a 7 and you proceeded down to 6-5, When you do it, you're considered to have grumbled. If a head's up, you have to flip the coin of fate. If a head comes up, you do a grumble action, which is you stand there grumbling, being a dwarf, because everybody forgot about you. It's the equivalent of like Sonic, like tapping his foot, waiting you for doing something. And then if tails comes up, the dwarf can complete any standard action. So standard actions are the basic ones, not the ones unlocked by either being a dwarf, keywords, or by whatever suit you flipped. At times when a player is raced ahead, it's feasible to simply wind back to allow the player to correct card in order to be processed. Canny players will note that you could choose to not activate warriors in order and thereby create activation blunders deliberately. There's a risky ploy that would make Hastus proud and is acceptable in the rules, which I like. You can legal procedure if you want. And then finally, we have our action list and combining actions. Some actions can be combined in a single activation. When it's possible, if it's specified in each action entry, multiple actions can be strung together as long as no single action is repeated in any single activation. As long as both actions would normally be available to that warrior. So, for instance, like reload and fire, for instance, might be like a thing that you can do. All right, so common actions, moving, so move your movement stat. Engaging, which means moving into an adjacent square to the enemy. Evading means getting out of those adjacent squares. Leaping a gap, carrying things, like picking something up, which again can be chained. Climbing up something, like a move where you have to go vertically. Standing up, a model is knocked down, but not engaged, or in a combat zone can stand up and move half their move characteristic. A model may engage an enemy model while standing up. Crawl. A model is knocked down and not engaged can crawl. Crawl is treated like a move action, but halves the movement characteristic rounding down. And the model remains knocked down at the end of their move. Crawl can be combined with evade to exit a combat zone. Crawling models may engage. So you can crawl away from people, which is there's a lack of dignity of that. Interacting with stuff. Interact allows the model to use objects in play, like equipment or inventory. It can be combined with move and evade, but only if interact actions in the last action performed in the activation. So you can move and then interact with something. So like, let's say you wanted to like run over and then like pick a lock, you could do that in the same turn. A reach attack, if you're attacking with something with the reach trait, that's attacking something you're not engaged with. To perform a reach attack action, the attacking model chooses an enemy that's in line of fire and exactly 2 squares away. The attacking model will make a martial skill test using the second value of their profile. The attacking enemy can roll no dice. If one or more successes is rolled, the reach attack will cause a single hit, driving back the enemy and resolving any damage as normal. So it's like poking with a spear and like driving somebody away. But models that are engaged can't perform a reach attack. So if you want to do a reach, you can't already be like fighting somebody up close. Ranged attacks, which is shooting at range. And then you get bonuses and penalties depending on some like things. Like if you moved first, you're minus D6. If your enemy is shrouded, you're minus D6. If it's at long range, 7 or more squares away, it's minus D6. If they're defending, so holding their shield up. If the enemy is in short range, you get plus D6. And if it's large, you get plus D6. If there's any successes, a single hit will be caused after resolving hits. A model has performed a ranged attack with a loaded weapon, must spend an ammunition marker on their profile card. A model that's engaged can only perform a ranged attack that's targeting the enemy it's engaged with, and models can perform a ranged attack with 2-handed weapons, cannot use any other weapon in the following fight phase, and are counted as having an improvised weapon. We have a reload action, removing your spent ammo markers, and you can choose to combine it with move or evade, but one as soon as the reload action is resolved. You can circle somebody when you're engaged, which means move inside the engagement squares. And then universal special actions. So these are the ones that are based on the suit that you flip for your activation order. So if you flipped a heart, you can overwatch with your gun. If you flipped a diamond, you could rush, which means moving faster. If you flipped a club, you could jump up, which means a model that's knocked down can perform a jump up. During a jump up action, the activated model is placed standing up, and they can perform any standard action except as though they've not yet been activated. So it's basically like a quick jump up that then you can just do anything standard afterwards. And then finally, search. And you can roll on the search table if you get a spade. Death from above. Resolve a stone block trap. Bolt traps. If you get a 7, nothing. On 8, you find a coin. A good lucky coin. Treasure. You find a lodestone pouch. A map. A rare treasure. We roll on small treasure tables. And then if you roll boxcars or rare treasure, the searching model finds an ancestral talisman. So, again, these are all like actions of opportunity, basically, if you pull a card. And what's handy is if you have that sheath card, and you have you can save it with an activation with that on it, so then that person can do one of these actions. Now, if you're a dwarf, you have the following special actions. but only, again, if you flip one of these suits. So if your activation is a heart, you can do Fury and do like a Berserker attack, Barge, push someone out of the way. Duel, which means call somebody out and fight them one-on-one. And then Defend, which is when you put your shields up and, block basically like shots and stuff coming at you. Complex engagements, when you have more than one person fighting. And the monster phase. This is our AI system for the monsters. During the monster phase, the denizens of the underworld will look for their prey. Any warriors in the dark are at risk of being dragged in the depths. There's dangers in the dark. Any warrior that begins the monster phase shrouded must make a danger in the dark test. Something might jump. You might get jump scared. This represents the warriors being caught off guard. Roll 2d6 for each of the shrouded warriors and consult below. On a 2, he was here a second ago. You're dead. So if you're in the dark, you might just die. Curses. You fall into a sinkhole hazard. 4 to 9, it's quiet. Nothing happens. Just a little one. Place a small swarmed monster engaged with you. They've got me. Place a brood monster. And then, oh no, place a brute monster. So again, 49 on average, nothing happens when you're in the dark. You're totally fine. But it's very Scooby-Doo. You're walking along the dungeon. It's dark outside. And then there might be a monster attacking you. Love this rule. It means that you're never just safe and you can't ignore the lights going out. And then things will activate in order. Hellions go first, then beasts, then brutes, and then finally swarms. And it goes from largest to smallest. The biggest, most dangerous things will go first, little things will go afterwards. Determine what a monster will do when it activates. Refer to the action sections of their profile. And there's keywords for things like line of sight, shrouded, perform, illuminated, engaged, bonuses, and default. So if there's no other actions applicable, it'll do these things. So here we have an example of a dark dweller. If he's engaged, he'll snare you. If he's in line of sight, he'll rush towards you. And if nothing else, he'll default to move. He'll move towards the nearest enemy model and engage it if possible. Nice, simple AI system. Love that it's visually coded and you can see exactly like what he's going to do. It's very simple. This is a great way of doing a character AI. And because they're doing like a card-based system for the heroes and the bad guys, these are really easy to keep track of. And you just look quickly on the card and see what's on the table and then what it's going to do. And that Dark Dweller is a brood monster. You can see his stat line's real simple. He's going to fight you in melee. And the fight phase. So it's contests. Both players roll a number of d6 equal to their warrior's martial skill. If there's a monster, the player other than the one fighting will roll the dice. The model that scores the most successes will win the contest, the most 5s. If one side blunders, they'll be knocked down before resolving any hits. If both models roll the same number of successes, or both models roll no successes, that's a draw. If there's a draw, players will add another d6 to the pool and reroll until somebody wins. You just keep fighting until somebody does something. There are some rules that allow models to win draws with no rerolls and scoring a single hit. Like having a sword, if you're a duelist, you get to do one hit. You do a number of hits based on the number of successes that you won by. And then it's capped by your agility. As I said earlier, agility limit will cap basically how much damage you can do. And then you resolve all your hits. If you're outnumbered, there's bonuses to the attacker and stuff. And then resolving your hits. So basically a number of things happen. First, you drive them back. It's Blood Bowl rules. Then press the attack. You can follow up if you want. Then you make save rolls for every hit that happened. If you roll any successes, for like if you have an item that gives you a save, then you cancel each hit for a success. So if a model had 2 save rolls and suffered 2 hits, they'd roll 2d6 for each hit, and any success will negate that hit. And then finally, check the strength of the hit. Reach attacks and hits from the fight phase from warriors or monsters will be equal to the strength of the model's profile plus any modifiers. Strength of range attacks will be based on the weapon. So for example, if your dwarf has a strength of 5, a firelock has a strength of 6, and a falling stone block trap has a strength of 9. And then it's minus the resilience. If the hit model from the strength, subtract the resilience of the hit model from the strength of the hit to a minimum of 1, the player then rolls a number of d6 equal to the result. So if I'm resilience 2 and you've hit me with strength of 5, I would then roll 3 dice for the damage roll and resolve damage and injuries. If at least 1 success is rolled, the model has been damaged by the hit. Every success on the damage roll causes a point of damage to the model, and then the warrior will also be knocked down. You can drive people back. Like I said earlier, if you're not driven back, you can be cornered, and then there's +1 strength to the damage roll afterwards. Save rolls are based on traits like armor and stuff like that. And then also pressing the attack means you get to move forward after the person that you're chasing. Flush wounds are things that will sometimes do like a bonus wound. Like if you take a flush wound, it just happens no matter what. Instant death if you roll 3 or more 6s in a damage roll, you just die. So basically, like that agility 3 dwarf, you only get to roll 3 damage dice, but if you roll 666, you roll the Yahtzee, he just kills you, just cuts your head off. And then finally, applying damage. Models suffer damage as a result of hits, and each success in the damage roll inflicts a point of damage. It reduces your agility, and if your agility goes to 0, then you're taken out of action. You become wounded. And all the characteristics in that model's profile, including the martial skill second value, are reduced by 1. And if you go below 0, then you're a casualty. So resilience 0 is like you're wounded and staggering around, and then negative, you actually become a casualty and get knocked out. Monsters, you don't want to track them, crazy. For that reason, you only track damage that accumulates on beasts and hellions. These models suffer damage just as dwarves do. So basically, everyone dies after a single hit, unless they're beasts and hellions, because they're just too big and crazy. And for swarms, broods, and brute monsters, if they take damage at all, remove the module as a casualty. This makes dwarves much tougher than monsters that they fight, which is a good thing, as there's far less of them, and monsters never get knocked down. So monsters are way more like swarmy and bullet spongy, and not as granularly tracked as anyone else. I like that looks like an orc / plague bearer there in that picture. Monsters can also drag you around because, they're evil monsters. And then finally, the event phase. All the engagements end. You might have to make a turn back test based on your leader's nerve or the highest one surviving. And then finally, light sources. Once the fuel's out, you have to roll die. On a 1, a lantern goes out. On 1 or 2, a torch goes out. And a 1, 2, or 3, burning spaces and models go out because you can be lit on fire in this. And then finally, events happen. There's scripted events for the scenario, and then random events you have to draw a card for. So, flip a joker, noises from below. Next turn, every warrior must pass a nerve test, and if they fail, they can only grumble because they get fucking spooked. On an A, an ace, a trap. On a king, a beast shows up. On a jack or a queen, a brute might show up. And then brood, monster brood. So basically on a 9 or 10, like a brood character shows up. A swarm. Time's running out. The fuel counter goes down by 1 additional point. A cave-in can happen. Portcullises can arrive. Very Warhammer quest there. I appreciate that. And the promise of loot on a 2. The player that drew this event draws an extra action card next delving phase, and any successful search actions by their crew are increased by 1. So basically you can go 1 higher, and then you change the coin of fate to somebody else. And that's our core rules. Pretty simple. So then we're into any additional stuff. States, like if you're knocked down, soaked, sun, burning. Items and objects that could be on the table, like chests, barrels, furniture, statues, and all this stuff will usually be dictated by the scenario, so whatever the map says you should have. Hazards, like gaps and falling, again, they'd be on the map. Cave-ins that can happen, like the event cave-in. Rules for large models, taking up more than 1 space, engaging in stampeding, so when something's got so big it's got to be on 2 squares, or 4 squares rather. And then rules for heroes. So that was a Greybeard, GRIMSKALD, whatever his name was, the example character at the beginning. He was a hero. He can use Valor. Valor represents a pool of points that can be spent after a hero takes a test. Any D6 that failed can be changed to a success by removing a point of Valor. So like might points in a strategy battle game. Fortune. You can negate damage with them. A point of damage for every fortune you have, like fate points. And then command. It's a command you can activate multiple models in a single activation. To use it, activate your hero and declare you're going to use command. Place an additional card from your hand on each warrior's profile card you wish to activate to a maximum number of your activating hero's nerve -2. So nerve 3, you can do an additional model when you command somebody. And then the leader trait lets you sheath the card and then take the turn back tests for the crew. Loner, a hero with Loner can only be chosen as a leader when no other heroes are available. So like Slayer heroes. Special equipment. The 3-hand rule. While it may be tempting to arm your warriors to the teeth, it isn't practical. As a result, many items in Torch and Shield will either have 1-handed or 2-handed in their equipment profile, as indicated by how practical it is to carry. So you have up to 3 hands worth of weapons. So like 3 1-handed weapons or a 2-handed and a 1-handed is kind of your max. And then hit weapons. No warrior in their right mind would enter the underworld without a single weapon. And few would risk it without a backup. Hit weapons have no special traits attached to them. And they come free with every warrior delving crew. So it's basically a knife. It's a boot knife. And you're always going to have a hit weapon. and have no other weapons, they can't. If whoever loses their hit but have no other weapons, then they count as having an improvised weapon. But you always have a hit weapon unless you're using like a musket or something in close combat, then you count as being improvised, even if you have a hit weapon. All right, bonus traits. So things like axes. Dwarves love those things. When hit by a brutal weapon and causing damage, you do an additional damage. It doesn't matter against most of the creatures, but against big guys, it'll super matter. Hammers and maces. They drive people back because they bludgeon. Swords win ties with riposte. Picks, they're piercing. They can ignore bonuses to armor. Battle axes, they're one-handed, brutal, and heavy. Broadswords, they're one-handed, heavy, and riposte. Warhammers, one-handed, heavy, and bludgeoned. War picks, one-handed, heavy, and piercing. Great weapons, two-handed, great, cumbersome, and brutal. Two-handed, great, cumbersome, and riposte on the two-handed sword. The win ties. And we basically bigger versions of every weapon. Glaives, they have the reach attack. Dual wielding, if you have paired weapons. If a model scores any hits, roll another d6. If it's a success, the warrior scores an additional hit and can roll another d6. If the next roll is a success, you score another hit and continue until you fail. So this is the berserker attack. Extra weapons, if your warrior is using two different one-handed weapons at the same time in the contest and wins and scores more than one hit, the second hit may be caused by the secondary weapon. So you can basically like pair up damage types if you want. All of our range attacks, showing the strength of the model that isn't the user strength. All of its traits, right? So brutal, it does the extra damage. Piercing, so we ignore some armor. And everything you can imagine a dwarf miniature being armed with is in here. Throwing axes, they have no traits, but they're very handy because they have a 3-inch range. Bombs, so you can throw black powder bombs. And we have torches and lanterns. They are one-handed weapons. You have to have them if you want to be using light. So someone's going to have to carry the light. This is the thing. In Warhammer Quest turns, it was the barbarian always had the lantern. So someone's got to have the lantern. It's going to go out at some point, and you got to stay nearby. Otherwise, you're in the dark, and you start to like get attacked, and the monsters will have some advantage. You want to shine lights on the monsters. Special rules, though. Casualties and being knocked down. When you're knocked down and carrying a light source, the light source counts as going out. Removed from the area of play. Torches are durable. When torches are used in a range attack, they are dropped for any reason. They're placed on the ground and keep burning. But lanterns are fragile. When you throw a lantern at somebody, it's hit, or scatters using dispersion for any region, it's destroyed. But the square begins burning and might go out. And then dropping lanterns and torches, sometimes you just want to drop them to use a two-handed weapon in the fight phase. Other times you might wish to drop a torch or lantern in a specified space, and you have to make tests to do so. Different armors, which give you saves, and you can layer them together to get increases to your saves. And then special and rare equipment. Badaraz Steel. This is their Gromrel. Arcane weapons and ancestral weapons that have special bonuses, right? So the ancestral weapon, based on what you have as your... when purchases are found, you randomly draw a card to see if it's piercing, as riposte, bludgeon, or brutal. And it's in addition to any other traits it might have for like what kind of weapon it is. So you have like an axe with riposte. And other cool equipment, like your Master Brews, because you're a dwarf. And that's kind of it for the core mechanics of like the warband. We have our scenarios. And we'll get into warband building in a minute. But you can see basically there's a bunch of core scenarios. Need a light. This is a quick one. So your first player one. Gold Rush. Gate Crash. Breaking down doors. It's a trap door. And then crossing over. And then we have the advanced scenarios, which is Rescue. You can see all the map layouts here. No Way Out. Lost Gold. And I'm pretty sure they all use roughly the same number of tiles and doors. Like the maximum is going to be, I think, there's like a maximum, I think, of 4 of everything. If you have 4 of every tile type, I think you're okay. That's about right. I'm sure there's a list, though, on their website. We've got the Crucible. And there's an objective room there in red. And then the lair, where the monster lives, in the middle. Traits list for all the traits in the game, for monsters and baddies and stuff. Keywords for the rules themselves. And then making a crew. All right, so you have 100 crowns to make a crew. You can recruit 2 heroes, up to 3 shortbeards, and any number of clansmen. Sounds familiar. Sounds a lot like Mordheim. You can never have more than 15 warriors. Well, that's cool because it was 12 in Mordheim for dwarves. Equip your warriors as you wish, but remember the 3 hands rule, and you always have a hip weapon at no cost. The great clans are also subject to different restrictions. This is a lot like the mercenary companies in Mordheim. If you choose one of the different great clans, they will give you special rules for your group. So a Grey Shield, he costs you 14. He's your hero guy. We saw him earlier. A Thane, 10. He's your champion. Clansmen are your basic guys. And Shortbeards, they're just kids. They're just little babies. Your Thane might have command as a skill, right? As does your Grey Shield. And you can buy things like a close combat weapon for 3 gold or a suit of plate armor for 4 gold crowns and upgrade them. They can be Bataroo's steel if you want, because he's rich. And your Grey Shield can upgrade a close combat weapon to being ancestral or Baradoo's steel. And they can also upgrade a suit of plate armor to Baradoo's steel and may wear a lavish display of gold for 6 gold crowns. That guy gets expensive fast. You get your equipment list here for you can buy them. And then all the special rules. So like Copperbrow, they have Gold Fever. They get their own little bunch of dudes you can take. So the Copperbrow crew gets additional selections of like a Gun Thane. So it's like a character with guns, and a Knight of the Crown, Engineers. The Iron Thane Crown can take Siege Thanes, Shield Thanes, and Weapon Thanes, because they're like the Arms Masters. The Boldar clan can take a Blood Thane. These are the Berserkers and Hurlers. These are like your Slayers. And we got our monster profile, and it's pretty generic. These basic monster profiles can represent any creature found in the dark, or any model in your collection. They're intended to operate in a simple and straightforward way. The Torch and Shield campaign books will detail the numerous unique monsters. So in the core rulebook, what you get is you get like a place all for Cretans, Dark Dwellers, Mindless Hulks, and Labyrinth Beasts. And this just gives you like a generic way of using whatever models you want. The Croaker is a large lesser demon hellion. And then we get some campaign rules. So how to start a campaign, how to generate random scenarios, recovery table for if you get taken out. You can be dead, stone recovery. He can hold an axe. And that means he's still alive, but starts the game with a damage, and then recovered is your fun on a 6+ on 2d6. Treasures that you can find and how to advance, learning skills. When your warrior gets 6 total advance points, they either become clansmen if they're shortbeards. Clansmen become thanes if they have less than 2 thanes in the crew. Otherwise, they gain a trait. The traits can be rolled for below based on your clan. And we've got some like different like narrative ways of playing, like doing the Into the Deep challenge or playing cooperatively with allies, and then some solo play rules as well. And the solo play is it's pretty much how to make decisions about the core rules when you're playing by yourself. So how do you do the delve phase when when you're just choosing the order you're activating in, basically? Executing AI actions, so like how the actions will go. If an AI warrior activates with a spade and ends its move unengaged, it can perform any other action. It will perform the defend special action. So like just an order of priorities on what things are going to do to try and make it challenging. And then, how to make it harder if it gets too easy for playing solo. More AI flows, more common sense stuff on how to run it by yourself, and then how to do a campaign on your own too. And then finally our index, and we're done. Some fun designer's note stuff in here as well. Basically about the intent and how the game's supposed to be like. That it's an adventure game, right? So play it like an adventure game. Don't try to be too competitive. And then we have our our resources. We have our player cards for each of the characters, some pre-builds if you want to just jump in and play. And these are all based, I believe, on the STLs that are in the crowdfund. And a reference for the solo play stuff, all the important things, the action matrix of what you can and can't do, equipment, reference sheet, and the core game reference sheet. And we're done. The digital edition of Torch and Shield. This was neat. I was very excited about this one. I'm glad the patrons picked it. This is one of those games where it's a very complete game. You don't need much outside of it. You could definitely do this miniature agnostic or as a hobby project on your own. But there's some additional content, as we already saw. If you guys want to go check out their website, obviously they have these... you can buy them terrain sets, but there was also the Darker Halls expansion, which you can see right here, which is going to add more content to the game, additional full rules for the Darker Halls Link scenarios, 6 new solo and co-op scenarios to pit your dwarf crew against, 5 new undead and shadow creatures, because this is kind of like the death version of the game, or expansion for the game, and rules for 6 mercenary hirelings to incorporate in your game, so your dramatis personae. And then some hobby stuff, how to make your own scratch-built dungeon, and some paint guides. So, like I said, there's a lot more to this if you want to kind of dig into it. And yeah, it's very like fleshed out and fully developed, which I love. So there it is. We did another Indie Hour, guys. And big thanks to patrons for picking this one. If you are watching this on YouTube live and public, then this was recorded a week before the patrons. We usually hang out for about a half hour afterwards and do some just chit-chatty stuff, talk about what we thought about the game, what hobby projects we might do, whether or not they're going to bully me into doing this as a full like Let's Play and series. If you've been watching GMG over the course of the last year, 2025, we've covered tons of games that were first featured in the Indie Hour and picked by the patrons. So if you're trying to get a game on GMG, this is a great way of doing it. Become a patron, nominate a game, and then vote for it in the polls. And it's usually how these things come to be. We've got 1490 Doom, and Flames of Orion just recently. We also did Throne Odyssey, Full Spectrum Dominance, tons of games through the Indie Hour series that have popped up as like full-fledged campaigns that we've played through, and there's lots more to come. We're working on a bunch of these ones for the near future. So jump in if you want to take part, if you got a game that you think deserves more attention. And if not, we will see you next week. And when you're watching this on YouTube, the next one should be getting recorded with the patrons. And you can get some additional content. Come hang out, chat, tell us what you think about the game and what games we should do next. So have a great week. We'll see you for another Indie Hour next Wednesday. Till then, I'm Ash. Stop gaming.